The ER nurse didn't even look up from her screen when the patient mentioned the sore throat. Why would she? It was a busy Tuesday. The waiting room was a chaotic blur of seasonal coughs and minor ailments, and strep throat is the medical equivalent of background noise. But within 6 hours, the patient wasn't just struggling to swallow. Her blood pressure was plummeting, her skin was turning a mottled, bruised purple, and her kidneys were beginning to shut down. This wasn't a common infection, this was a biological blitzkrieg. Most people believe that if a rapid strep test comes back negative, you're safe, you're home free. You're not. And by the time the real truth reveals itself, your body might already be surrendering to a catastrophic systemic collapse. What happens when your own immune system turns against you? And how can a simple bacterium trick every diagnostic tool in the hospital? Elena was 50, a marathon runner, a high-performing architect, the kind of woman who viewed a fever as a personal insult to her schedule. It started as a scratchy throat on a rainy Monday, a minor inconvenience. She went to an urgent care clinic where the rapid test came back negative. She was sent home with instructions for tea, rest, and ibuprofen. She felt vindicated. It was just a virus, right? Her body was just tired from the project deadline. But that night, the scratchiness shifted. It became a sharp, deep-seated ache that felt like she was swallowing broken glass. She woke up at 3 a.m., not from the pain, but from a shivering cold that made her teeth chatter so violently she feared they might crack. She turned on the bedside lamp, and that's when she saw it. Her left arm, the one she'd been lying on, was covered in a faint, reddish-purple rash. It wasn't a heat rash, it wasn't hives. It looked like a map of veins beneath her skin, bruised and angry. What exactly is happening at the cellular level when a simple throat infection decides to stop playing by the rules and invade the bloodstream? Before we look at the microscopic war she was losing, if you've ever wondered why your body sometimes reacts with such aggressive, confusing symptoms to minor infections, leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. It helps me understand the clinical experiences you've lived through. By 8 a.m., Elena was in the ER. She was lethargic, her cognitive function clearly impaired, barely able to answer the intake nurse's questions. Her heart rate was 140 beats per minute, struggling to push blood through vessels that were becoming dangerously leaky. The ER physician was visibly puzzled. Rapid strep was negative, he muttered to the resident. But her inflammatory markers are off the charts. Her lactate is rising. This isn't just a throat infection. This is septic shock. What they didn't know was that Elena had encountered a specific, hyper-virulent strain of Streptococcus pyogenes. This wasn't the standard bug you pick up at the playground. It was a variant equipped with molecular camouflage. It produced a super antigen, a toxin so potent it didn't just fight the immune system. It forced the immune system to commit suicide. Imagine an army where the soldiers, instead of attacking the enemy, start firing blindly at their own commander and their own headquarters. That is the Strep Toxic Shock Syndrome. The immune system triggered by these toxins releases a cytokine storm, a massive, uncontrolled flood of inflammatory chemicals. Elena's organs were being digested by her own defenses. The blood vessels, usually tight and secure, were now opening like floodgates, allowing vital plasma to leak into the surrounding tissues. The rash on her arm was spreading fast. It was now dark purple with patches of blackened skin. This is the stage where the infection moves from serious to life-altering. The toxins were causing the blood vessels to widen uncontrollably, dropping her blood pressure to a point where her brain and kidneys were no longer receiving enough oxygenated blood. The medical team was running a protocol of pure desperation, high-dose intravenous antibiotics, massive volumes of fluids to try to keep her vessels full, and vasopressors to force her heart to keep pounding. But every minute they waited for the lab cultures to confirm what they already suspected, Elena's healthy tissue was dying. How can a doctor surgically intervene when the infection is everywhere at once? This is the moment the surgical team has to make the most agonizing decision in the hospital: the cut or wait dilemma. Do they operate immediately to remove the source of the toxins, knowing the patient is incredibly unstable? Or will the surgery itself cause her heart to stop entirely? If you want to understand the limits of modern emergency medicine and how we decide who survives these biological storms, ensure you're subscribed. We break down the clinical files that the textbooks are too afraid to touch. The surgeons arrived. They looked at Elena's arm, then at her throat, then at each other. They didn't have hours. They had minutes. They opted for the radical approach, aggressive debridement. They had to cut away the infected skin and tissue, hoping that removing the main factory of the toxins would give Elena's immune system the breathing room it needed to stop its own self-destruction. It was a blood-soaked, frantic race. The tissue they removed didn't look like skin, it looked like gray, necrotic mush. The Streptococcus had literally dissolved the connective tissue holding her muscles together. The room was tense, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor and the sharp, clinical commands of the lead surgeon. But as they finished, the monitor beeped a warning. Her heart was tiring. The cytokine storm had already caused significant damage to her heart muscle. They had essentially stopped the fire, but the house was still smoldering. The surgery was a success, but the physiological toll on her body was immense. Elena survived, but the recovery was a brutal, slow climb. She lost a significant tissue in her arm and spent 2 weeks in a medically induced coma while her kidneys regained their function. She survived the infection, but she had to learn what it meant to be a patient, to depend on others for the basic functions she'd spent 50 years perfecting on her own. This case forces us to ask, why did her test come back negative? It's a major flaw in our standard diagnostic protocol. Rapid tests look for specific proteins on the surface of the bacteria. If the bacterial load is low in the throat, but the bacteria are aggressively producing toxins elsewhere, or if it's a specific, rarer strain, the test fails. It gives us a false sense of security, while the true enemy is already setting up shop in your bloodstream. Medicine isn't just a set of checkboxes. It's a constant, shifting battle against biology that is always evolving, always hiding, and always waiting for a moment of weakness. It requires us to look past the protocol and see the patient behind the symptoms. Elena's recovery reminds us that survival isn't just about the drugs we administer. It's about the resilience of the human architecture. Her body had been pushed to the absolute edge of existence. She spent months in physical therapy, relearning the fine motor skills that her profession as an architect demanded. But even today, she has a permanent reminder, the scars on her arm where the surgeon cut away the damage. They are not marks of defeat. They are the physical proof of a victory against an invisible molecular assassin. Every time she looks at them, she remembers that the most dangerous threats are often the ones we dismiss as common, simple, and harmless. You've seen how one woman's resilience saved her from a common throat infection that turned deadly. But what happens when the enemy doesn't just invade from the outside? What happens when the error lies in the most complex protected structure we own? If you think you understand what it takes to stop a biological emergency, you need to see this. Click on the video on your screen to explore the stagnant assassin, where we break down what happens when the threat isn't just systemic, it's trapped inside your own head. Stay analytical, stay critical, and above all, stay human.